Audio. Okay, this is a test. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, hold on a second.
Morning, Mike.
Morning. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
All right.
So many people on crutches around here.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing.
Yeah. Where do I get one?
You can have mine. Hey, John.
Come on. How you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing well.
Okay, go ahead and start. Uh, We're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sedgwick County Staff Meeting for today, Tuesday, December 7th. With that, I'll hand it over to Tom Stoltz. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners, and Commissioner Lopez is on the phone this morning. We have two items today. Both are have pretty good substance to them, so they could take a while. The first issue is we're going to, again, talk about, give an update on the remodeling for additional court space in this building, which you all approved as part of the ARPA discussion several months ago. Tanya Cole is here today to give an update on that, plus revisit ideas and strategies moving forward to a new administrative space for those of us that are being displaced from this building so that the courts can have sufficient space. The second item is Elizabeth Wingo is here today who's our risk management coordinator in finance and wants to talk about the accident review policies. Accident review and also work comp policies. There's some fairly radical changes we'd like to do with safety inside the county, and Elizabeth will step us through some of the policy drafts today and make commissioners aware of how we're moving toward that. So we'll start with Tanya, and recognizing that Commissioner Lopez is on the phone, and away we go.
Okay, good morning, Tanya.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tanya Cole, Assistant County Manager. And with me today, and part of this presentation, is Justin Graham, who is the Vice President of Schaefer, Johnson, Cox, and Fry.
Morning. Welcome. Who's that sitting next to you?
Happy to have Shannon Bowen with us as well.
Oh, hi, Shannon. I didn't recognize you. Good to see you both.
Okay, as the manager mentioned, I'm here to give an update on the remodel of the courthouse space as well as county administration building. So let me just start off with giving an update on the courthouse space remodel. As Lindsay has mentioned several times as part of the ARPA project and the 2022 financial of the ARPA project, we have talked a lot about the courthouse space remodel and the court backlog. So as part of helping with the court backlog, what we'll be doing for the courthouse space is doing an additional courtroom on the 7th floor, 2 additional courtrooms on the 8th floor, an additional courtroom on the 9th floor, and then remodeling the space on the 11th floor to accommodate 3 appellate judges and their staff, and then remodeling the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor space, currently where Register of Deeds and clerk's offices, as well as the county commission, the manager, and legal is, all for the district attorney's office. And that is a project budget of just a little bit over $7 million. In order to do so, the next steps on that project is to award architectural and engineering services, and you'll see tomorrow on bid board that we'll be awarding or asking for award to 7 firms. And so once that gets awarded, what we'd like to do is assign our architectural firm to this particular project. And we are estimating that construction documents will take approximately 4 to 6 months, with the remodel timeline of 12 to 18 months. So an approximate completion that would look around April to December of 2023 for this particular project that I'm talking about, and that is for the courthouse space. Next, what we'll need to do, and in conjunction with this, is to move the admin functions out of the courthouse space. And so that's moving 7 departments out. That is the county clerk, the county treasurer, register of deeds, finance, county commission office, county counselor's office, and the county manager's office. And currently that's in progress right now. We contacted our on-call real estate broker, and there is currently 7 lease spaces that we were looking at, and we believe that we're down to 1 lease space that looks to be our best lease space for these county admin functions. And so we're looking at a timeline to move the admin functions out approximately between April and June of 2022. So we're looking at phasing those 7 departments out. And of course, the lease timeline, so the amount of time that we're in this lease, of course, is dependent on when we would move into an admin building. So any questions on that? I've gone through what we're doing here in the courthouse, and then moving our admin functions out into a lease space, and then, of course, staying in that lease until we move into an admin building. So let me just pause there and ask if you have any questions on that.
Well, thanks for reviewing the timeline and the organization, because
Sure.
we all kind of know it, but that helps remind us.
You bet.
Any other, Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. Did you say appellate space was 3 more appellate courtrooms and staff?
3 appellate judges and their staff, their admin staff. That would
Do
be
they
on
share a
11th
courtroom?
floor.
Or how's that? I mean, are they using another courtroom in the building somewhere? Or?
That's correct. They will not, that is just for their office space. They will not use a courtroom on the 11th floor.
Okay, so they'll just use other courtrooms in the building somewhere?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so let me move on to the county administration building review. What we did, understanding that we would have to go into a county admin building, we asked our county admin functions to basically review their programming. It had been a while since we had met with them, and so we asked them to refresh their programming. And so we had originally met with 12 departments, and what you'll see here is 10 departments, and I'll explain here in a little bit why we're only talking about 10 departments versus 12. But the first number that you see there is their current square footage that they occupy right now. And the second number that you see there is their programming square footage number. So in some cases, you'll see a little bit of an increase. Some cases, you'll see a little bit of a decrease. And in some cases, you'll see a significant increase. And so let me just point out for the Board of County Commissioners, of course, you see a significant increase. I might just point out that is due to we're increasing the size of the boardroom. So you'll see here, we're going to increase that, almost double that size there, so that we can accommodate the public for the County Commission boardroom. As well, we are looking at the future, and if there's ever a case where we go from 5 commissioners to 7 commissioners, we've accommodated for that as well. A couple things just to point out, for instance, finance has grown a little bit. They've also increased their staff. So that's why you see a little bit of an increase there. And then towards the bottom there, you're seeing that we are increasing a lobby, and then of course courthouse police screening, and then we're adding a cafe if we should move into a admin building. I did mention that there are no longer 2 departments there. And let me explain that. IT is not in this, as well as the print shop mailroom. IT is moving to a remote operations, so they do not feel that they need to be in a county admin building. And then print shop and mailroom, they feel that they can do their operations out of the historic courthouse, so they don't feel that they need to be in a county admin building. Okay, so let me move on to this next slide. So total building tenant area, and so that's taking those total numbers that I just showed you from the 10 departments. That's adding that number, that's 62,292 square feet. That's the total building tenant area. Then we need to add in circulation space, which is 30%. So that includes your mechanical space, your stairs, your elevator, public corridors, and restrooms, for a total square footage of 80,980 square feet. So in sum, for a county building, administration building, we're looking for a building that's 80,980 square feet. Okay, these next slides, I'm going to have Justin go over these next slides. He has taken some time, again, to refresh some of our options that we've looked at in the past for a county building, county administration building area. And then he's added some few more, some new options that he'd like to go over as well. So, Justin?
Thank you, Tanya.
Good morning, Justin.
Commissioners and staff. My pleasure to be with you this morning. As Tanya mentioned, we've been carefully examining several options for an admin building placement and an arrangement. And so if I move to the first one here, I have 5 in total to review with you. Okay, so number 1 will look the most familiar. This is the arrangement that we had last presented for a new building addition to the courthouse on this property. And so, as you can see there in the aerial view, the existing courthouse is at the south, the lower portion, and then the annex is this appendage that ranges here to the northeast. And so this option was to remove a portion of the annex. And so all of that area, which is in yellow to the north, would be removed, and a new 4-story admin building would be constructed in that place. There's also an appendage on the north side of that in yellow, which would be a 2-story portion to that building. In order to fit this on the site, we do need to encroach onto Elm Street a little bit, and so what's shown is that Elm Street would remain open, but would be reduced to 2-way traffic with parking on one side of the street as opposed to 2 sides, which it currently has. At the back side of the building, we would envision that this would be secured with a wall or fence, and then connect back to the jail to the west. And so the secured entrance to the property would be through the gate, or it would be reconstructed, but in that same zone where the entrance is for the sheriff's entrance to the jail today. And then that would allow for deliveries and to the rear of the building, and then also for some parking, covered parking on the back side of the building is what we would envision there. It's a formal arrangement. The existing building takes on this rectangular shape on the upper stories. That's what we're proposing with this, arranged parallel to the existing building. And we'll present some 3D views of this here in a couple slides. Pros and cons, we'd like to point out to each of these options that we identified some of the major ones. Again, this would be a formal design that we could blend with the existing building. Being all new construction, really we'd only be tying into the courthouse at the first floor. All other floors would be separate from the courthouse, and so with that, we'd have the flexibility of finished floor heights that we want to achieve in the new building and not be relegated to the existing. Of course, we have the existing parking garage to the north, and so we wouldn't have to create additional parking with a new admin building located on another site, for example. The services that are presently here would remain here at the government center where public is used to visiting. And then Elm Street, of course, it can be reduced to 3 lanes or 2 lanes and parking on one side, but remain open for access to the jail and also fire access to the building. And that's something that I'll talk about in an upcoming slide. Cons with this option, we would be demolishing a portion of the annex, so loss of some existing square footage that you have. Disruption to deliveries during construction. So as you can imagine, constructing this large building here, deliveries presently happen at this location of the courthouse, and so those would need to be redirected elsewhere while that building is constructed. Construction wouldn't be able to start until after the annex would be vacated. And then there would also be some reduction in sheriff's parking in their lot presently. So if you can see in faint, there's the wall that presently divides the jail parking from the county courthouse parking. And so this would open up for vehicular circulation. I don't want to spend too much time on square footage numbers here for each department. Tanya's already covered those, but on the upper left portion of this slide, we do have a list of all of the departments that would be located within the building. I would like to just quickly highlight on the first floor, we would have obviously entrance lobby and courthouse police and screening. We would envision having the BOCC meeting room, a boardroom on the first floor. We would have also on the first floor a little bit of studio space for the manager's department. The treasurer would be located on first, and a small cafe, and courthouse police, as I already mentioned. And so as we work those numbers, the proposed addition would break down into about 10,800 square feet at the basement level, 19,100 at the first floor, 16,100 at the second floor. And the reason that is less is that we would envision the lobby being a two-story space, and so the second floor would be reduced within the overall footprint of the building to allow for that two-story element. 19,200 on the third and fourth floors for about 84,400 square feet. As we begin to stack the building, we have a multi-story building, and we try to achieve adjacencies between departments and locating those on the same floor that they want to be on. We do end up with some available space in this footprint of about 2,200 square feet, and so a total of about 84,400 square feet. The upper right, we have the cost estimate for this addition. Starting at the top, the new building with general site accommodations, and we're going to break down these square footages, but I have 69,820 at $325 a square foot for about 22.7 million. The BOCC meeting room, 3,750 square feet, $400 a square foot. That would be a more expensive space with sloped floor, fixed seating, and dais and so forth. So that's about 1.5 million. Some of the nuances of this building, we have some overhangs, and then we have the two-story lobby space that I mentioned. And so a little under 6,000 square feet there at $100 a square foot is 589,500. And then the basement, 10,835 square feet at $156 a square foot. The basement being records and mechanical space would receive very minimal finishes, and so that's the reason for the lower cost per square footage there. So about $1.7 million for that portion. We have connecting link to the existing building at about just under 100,000. The portion of the annex that would remain as we tie back into it, we have about 1,500 square feet that would need to remodel, and we see a price tag of about $200 a square foot for that at $300,000. And then the demolition of the northern portion of the annex at about $10 a square foot, $232,000. And we plugged in an allowance of $100,000 for some rework of Elm Street that would be required with this option. So approximately $27 million option here. We're suggesting a 10% contingency and an inflation for each of these options that we present today. Obviously, we know there'll be some time before the construction would start, so we would expect some inflation. And then at this high level of design, there's a lot of unknowns that we would need to create some contingency for. The next option I call 1A, which, looking at the aerial here, looks just like the previous option did. But this one explores the idea of, rather than demolishing the annex, retaining the annex and bridging over it with the third and fourth floors of the addition. And so not uncommon to do this, but certainly would require some additional study to see how this could work for us. But all other site conditions remain the same as option one, but again, we would be saving the annex in this scenario. So again, pros, formal design that blends with the existing. We could make this look just like the previous option. We would have reduced square footage of new construction, as we would be saving the annex. The existing parking garage, of course, is there to support the facility. Keeps the services in the government center. Elm Street remains open. And also we'd be able to retain adult probation in the basement of the annex if we were to save that building. Cons of this would be coordination with the existing column spacing and floor heights of the existing, of the annex. And of course, disruption to deliveries, as I mentioned before, and then reduced parking in the sheriff's lot. So in this scenario, the numbers, square footages remain very similar to the last scheme. The proposed addition equals about 71,115 square feet. The remodeled area is about 14,030 square feet, and then we still have the connecting link of 250 square feet. So in this one, looking at the costs for new building and site, 56,770 square feet of new construction. This we bumped $10 a square foot from the previous scheme because of we would anticipate some more expensive structure to bridge over the existing building. And, you know, with further study, we could really better understand the impact of that on the costs. But this is just a gesture that there would be additional cost with that at this time. So about roughly $19 million for that portion. The BOCC meeting room remains at $1.5 million. The overhang and lobby are similar at just under at $492,000. The basement similar at $1.657 million, $1.6 million. The connecting link just under $100,000. And here we have the biggest difference would be remodeling the annex, 15,535 square feet at $200 a square foot for roughly $3.1 million. And so I do want to point out, you know, the $200 a square foot may seem high for remodeling, but we would envision all new source equipment for mechanical. Currently, that's on the system that feeds the courthouse. If that became part of the envelope of the administration building, we would want to serve it with new HVAC as part of that system. Really would involve demolishing the exterior walls to try to open it up to the addition. So just a lot of heavy remodel involved with that scheme. And then we do have some demolition. I didn't point out, but the little appendage, if I go back, if you can see it faintly, this first floor bump out on the annex here, we would envision removing that. So we do have some demolition costs of roughly $13,000, and then the Elm Street $100,000 allowance there. So this option comes in roughly $26 million. So potentially $1.2 million in savings from option 1A. And again, we're suggesting the 10% contingency, as you see there. So I think this slide will look familiar. This is the rendering that we presented last for this concept of the 4-story admin building on this property. And so we think it would make a very attractive addition to the building. Okay, moving on to option 2. We were asked to explore, well, is it possible to build the admin behind the annex? And what would that look like? Can it fit? And so what we have here is the notion that the annex would remain here on the front. This would be remodeled and opened up on the backside, likely to the admin building on first and second floors. The area shaded in yellow would be a 3-story addition, and to achieve roughly 19,300 square feet is what we'd like to have as a minimal square foot per floor, because that accommodates several of the departments that we want to have adjacencies or see adjacencies on the same floor. So to achieve that 19,300, we would be poking around the north end of the annex and developing some frontage on Main Street. Obviously, Elm Street would be closed with this option, and so one of the things that we would have to consider is a turnabout at the south end of Water Street over here. And as you can see in red, this would be the minimum diameter of a turnabout that we could have for fire apparatus. So for fire access and their vehicles to be able to maneuver around the building, we would need that. And so you can see that's a pretty large area there to accommodate that, and just kind of barely squeezing in to the back side of the building here. Again, the entrance would be, for secured parking, would be over here, and then we envision covered parking under the building in this area, but we could not achieve as much covered parking here as we had in the previous two schemes. Really, we'd be doing some gymnastics with this floor plan, I think, to make this shape work, and but to discuss the benefits, obviously we would have reduced square footage of new construction as we would be salvaging the annex in this scheme. You have the existing parking garage again to support the facility, keeping the services in the government center. We'd be able to retain adult probation in the annex basement. But the cons, we see this as probably lacking some formal appearance and presence on the site. If you can imagine the shape of this building kind of wedged in here. It would be a challenging footprint, would require some additional study for sure to see how it could work. In this scheme, we don't have any additional square footage. As I mentioned in the previous two schemes, we had about 2,200 square feet available. As we worked the numbers and looked at this, it made sense to go 3 stories rather than 2, but that did not allow for additional square footage. And so if we wanted to create more square footage, we would have to probably extend this space out to the property edge at the sidewalk. I imagine not ideal views from the windows of the north side towards the garage. This would be about 30 feet south of the garage to make this work. You'd have a fairly narrow, almost alley type width green space between the two buildings that would be in shade probably year round. You'd lose all parking that you have on Elm Street today. And there would certainly be more utilities to relocate with this scheme if we were to to expand all the way across the street. Limited secured parking, as I mentioned back here, and then disruption to deliveries, of course, and loss of visibility to the adult detention facility. And so, with the public entrance located here, there's a nice view from Main Street that one can see the jail beyond, and so we'd be losing that. And then reduced parking as well. So if we look at the numbers on this one, we would have the lobby, courthouse police on the first floor, BOCC meeting room on the first floor. We'd have a portion of HR on one, Register of Deeds, treasurer, and cafe, and a little bit of storage. On the second floor, we would envision the clerk and finance and the majority of HR. And then on the third floor, BOCC offices, counselor, manager, and facilities. So this scheme generates a new construction of about 67,435 square feet remodeling the existing annex of 15,300 square feet. And so if we look at the cost on this one, new building and site, $52,850 at $325 a square foot is about $17.2 million. The BOCC meeting room remains the same, $1.5 million. We have the connecting link to the existing building, the same. We would have less overhang on this building is pretty much the footprint that you see on that aerial would be occupied floor space all the way to the exterior walls with no overhang. The basement, 10,835 square feet at $156 a square foot, roughly $1.7 million. Remodeling the annex, again, $200 a square feet is a little over $3 million. And then we do have a little bit of demolition involved with removing the courthouse police appendage to the annex at $4,000. And then we've plugged in an allowance of $1 million for the impact on removing Elm Street. So this option is about $24.6 million. Again, we're a little less square footage. This one yields a total of 82,735 square feet. Options 1 and 1A were 84,400 square feet. So we're not quite apples to apples on total construction here. But again, so this option's about $24.6 million. Okay, option number 3 would be the property that, this is a very narrow footprint, and so that would be a challenge to fit multiple tenants per floor in that type of a skinny building. And then proximity to the jail, views from the south would be looking straight into the jail wall there. If we break down the numbers on this, we kept all the square footage is the same as options 1 and 1A so that we have a similar comparison. So this would be in a new building of roughly 84,400 square feet, 69,820 square feet of new construction at $325 a square foot is roughly $22.7 million. BOCC meeting room, same 1.5, same overhang and 2-story lobby, 589.5. And then the basement, 10,835 square feet at 156 for 1.7. So this option is about $26.5 million. The last option that we want to show is the property at 3rd and Main that has been discussed before. So 3rd Street up here, Main Street on the right. And you can see there in yellow, the new admin building. This would be a 4-story building, roughly 19,300 per floor. We would need parking to replace. This is an existing surface lot, which is owned by the city. So we would need to replace parking and have adequate parking to serve this building. And so this scheme looks at a 3-level garage constructed here on the left, yielding about 276 stalls. We could have some visitor parking, surface parking in front of the building here, and then private fenced-in parking on the south. Benefits to this scheme, total freedom of design. It's on a green site, not an addition to the existing building. We could achieve a little bit of visitor parking on the surface lot, which the other schemes don't show. We keep services near the government center, so we're a block south of where we are today. Keeping the annex would be another benefit, just for the square footage, and then no disruption to the courthouse or the adult detention facility with this scheme. Cons would be land purchase, so the cost of that, and then parking garage expense. So if we break down the numbers for square footages, again, we kept those the same as options 1A, and 3. So a new building of roughly 84,400 square feet. Cost of the land to be determined. breaking down the numbers in the similar fashion that we have on all the others. The main difference on this one would be the cost of the parking garage that we'd estimated a little north of $5 million for 276 stalls. And that yields a total of approximately $32 million for this option, plus the cost of land. Just analysis of the parking before the Ronald Reagan building has 90 spaces. They would retain their 90 spaces with this scheme. We'd be adding the garage at 276 spaces. Third and Main, we had 134 spots in that surface lot before. After, we have 32 surface parking stalls for a total of just under 400, which is a total gain of 174 parking spaces on this site. And so with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Tanya, and then we can address questions after that. Does that sound good? Okay.
So Commissioners, this next slide puts all of the costs together for your review between all the options. Option 1 then being $27 million, which is the demo of the annex option. Option 1A is to remodel the annex, just almost $26 million, $25.9. Option 2 is to close Elm Street, and that is $24.6 million. Option 3 was the north of the jail option at $26.4 million. And option 4 was the Third and Main option at a total cost of $31.9. I might just add, on all of these options, we will want to add an additional $6 million for owner's cost. And so that is including architectural and engineering services, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and then project contingency, which Justin alluded to, which is the 10%. So also when we were talking about county administration building, we had also, in previous years, we've also looked at remodeling existing buildings. So I wanted to go over that a little bit as well. In 2021, we looked at the West Central 2622 West Central building. That was a building acquisition that we looked at for $4.1 million. We decided that was not going to be a good fit for us. We knew that there was going to be remodeling cost and repair costs, and so we did not decide to go further with that building. Also in 2019, we looked at the 345 Riverview building, and with acquisition, remodel, repair, and utility cost, that was going to be a little bit over $20 million for that building. Also, we were approached in 2019 for a turnkey building at Gander Mountain for $21.2 million. In 2019, we had a turnkey building. We were approached by 150 North Main for a turnkey building at a cost of $17.5 million. In 2018, there was an acquisition-only price for the Murphin building at $6.9 million. And then in 2018, we were approached by the Epic Tower building for $25 million, and that was acquisition only. So I just bring that up as a history of some of the buildings that we looked at for remodeling and acquisition as well when we were looking at the county admin building. I also put those years in there just to have an understanding as we approach 2022 that we're going to be looking at inflation costs as well as supply chain issues. So we understand that we're not going to be looking at, likely at those prices in relative costs in 2022. I put this slide in here. We always see the slide when we're talking about the admin building. This is the stakeholder input that we received when we've talked about the county admin building, both from those that will move into the county admin building as well as those affected by working with those in the admin building. And that is that they would like to see convenience to the public, collaboration between departments, function and efficiency and security and safety for the county admin building and those working within those functions and operations. So I leave it at that and ask if you have any questions, and then leave it open for your discussion.
Okay, any questions from the commission? My briefest of comment is, which one is it? The one that had a lot of cons. Probably isn't worth spending a lot more time on. That's just my observation. The one that closed Elm Street. But I yield to
Thank you, Mr.
Commissioner Dennis.
I want to thank Schaefer Johnson, Cox and Fry for going through this again. You're getting to be friends because we see you fairly frequently. And thanks to Tanya from your staff for working on this. A couple quick questions. On that last option, option 4, you don't have any remodel for the annex, so no remodel be, if we just go someplace else, we're not going to have to do anything for the annex in order to be able to provide all of the court functions in this area?
That's correct. In the $7 million project budget, I had a little bit in there for remodeling the annex should we need to. But for this particular proposal, in the $31.9 million, there's nothing in there for the annex.
Okay. If we did choose that option and we needed to remodel the annex, we would be able to use ARPA funds to remodel the annex in like we're using in the building now?
I think that's correct, but I think if we are to remodel the annex, it would have to be for court functions to be able to do that. So if it's anything that would, we would need to use court functions or DA or anything for that matter in the annex. That would be able to use ARPA funding.
But one of the previous concerns about tearing down the annex is that we're removing valid space that we could use for court functions. So the DA wouldn't need it. We wouldn't be using the annex at all.
No, the DA is going to move into the second and third floor. So it would be if there's any growth that the courts would have, if there's any growth that the DA would have, if we move the probation that's in the basement, if they would move up to the annex on first or second floor, anything of that nature, we would use the ARPA funding for the annex space.
Okay. Also staying on that new construction at 3rd and Main, talks about a garage of 276 spaces. Right now, I know that we're leasing some space from the city for MABCD and for planning and so forth. Is this 276 give us an opportunity to quit leasing that other space? Is that all? Does that meet all of our parking needs, or are we still going to have to lease space?
I believe the 276 would take care of that. We are currently leasing 130. We have 134 spaces that we're utilizing at 3rd and Main. And then we would bring over approximately 176 or so employees. So that 276 should take care of all of the employee base that we would need at that parking garage.
Okay, so we're not moving anybody, or we're able to move everything out of the city-owned property?
I believe so.
Where we're parking?
Yeah.
Okay. Have we talked to the city, because this excludes the price of land?
I'm going to defer to Tom on that.
We had discussion with the city back in the day when we talked about this originally, 3 or 4 years ago, and we threw some prices around with Mr. Rigby over there, but nothing formal, sir, and nothing recent.
Okay. Well, out of all of them, honestly, the new construction at 3rd and Main has the least disruption on all of the operations that we have here, and if we start doing some construction in this location, in this footprint, we're going to disrupt some functions in the sheriff's department or in the courthouse and so forth. So the new construction down the street would not cause any of those problems. But if we go back and look at a couple of the other options, the one where we build north of the jail, one of the cons in that was the fact that we would not be able to expand the jail. Our hope is that with all of the work that we're doing with the Mental Health Coalition and so forth, that we never have to expand the jail. So I don't know that that's a con. If all of our plans for the future work out, we don't need to do that. The other thing, though, about that option, I understand that anybody looking to the south would see the jail and nothing else, so putting any windows there wouldn't do them much good. But I was just wondering about closing Pine Street, if that's an option, and moving that entire footprint to the north, because Pine Street's really not something that'd be used very heavily.
I think that's something we would have to look into. I also think we'd want to have a conversation with the sheriff about that as well.
Okay. Well, as we look at all these options, I know the most expensive one is option 4, but it probably has the most flexibility to do everything that we need to do for the future. And it does not disrupt the operations that we're doing right here in this footprint. So if you're looking at where we're at and where we need to go, that's probably, out of all the options, the one that I would favor. But the bottom line is that we made a decision here several months ago that we are going to have to move out of this building. We've committed to that. We're going to start construction. We're going to have to go into temporary facilities for a period of time. And the staying in temporary facilities is not optimal to government. So whatever option that we choose, we need to start moving forward and making a decision. I've been here for 5 years and we haven't been able to make a decision. The previous commissions before that haven't been able to make a decision. We're now to the point we have to make a decision, and we need to make the best decision that we can make with the least disruption and the most flexibility. So that's why I still lean towards option 4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. I do agree with some of the sentiments of Commissioner Dennis as far as the expansion of the jail. Hopefully we won't ever have to do that. That's why we're working so hard to create systems that will rehabilitate folks that they won't need to go to the jail. So I do appreciate that comment. I do have a couple of questions just around logistics of managing projects and also the financial situation that this will put us in. So in a second, Lindsay, I'd love for you to come up just to kind of talk about that. But Tanya, you have put an incredible amount of time into this, as well as Justin and Shannon and all the people who have worked on this in many years. And so first, I just want to thank you for that. I can't even imagine how much time has gone into all of this. So we already have the crisis ComCare expansion in the works. We're working on that. That's a new, $15 million plus project. If this was to be approved, what is the staff's capacity to manage all of these projects? Would the current staffing be enough? Would we have to hire people to manage these things? How does that work? Please help me understand that.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Commissioner. We actually, through ARPA, have added an additional project manager, knowing that we would need additional help. And so this project manager would address the actual remodel of the courthouse space, and will likely help us with some of this county admin building if we're able to move forward. But their primary role will be, because it's ARPA funding, will be to assist with the remodel of the courthouse space.
So managing the courthouse space, we have somebody for, but
Correct.
managing the ComCare expansion and managing this.
Yeah, we have 3 project manager. We have a project manager. We have 2 project managers. And then we have an additional project manager that will help with the courthouse space. So 4 in total. Okay. And then we have Andrew Diltz and myself that will all be working on all of this stuff. So I can guarantee you with confidence that we will be able to work on all of these projects. It sounds like a lot, but we have some pretty high level staff who will be able to help with this. And I have full confidence in their capability to be able to handle all of this.
Okay, I know y'all are good. I just want to make sure we're good to go. Okay, so that answers that question. And Lindsay, can you mosey on up here, please? So my questions around the financial aspect of this would be, what does our bond capacity look like? What sort of, debt service are we going to have to carry on this? What will that do to that? And then what will this do to the forecast of the outer years if we were to bond this project in addition to our CommCare Crisis Center? Can you answer those questions for me?
I can certainly attempt to try, and I
you.
will follow up with something in writing, so
Okay.
you guys have a record of this. But to answer your first question in terms of bond capacity, we have ample bond capacity. I think we talked about this at the Commission's workshop on budget last year, and I know we talked about it during the May retreat. May workshop discussions too. So we know that we have significant debt falling off here in the next 5 to 7 years through Exploration Place, our Spirit bonding, NCAT, things like that. So we would have ample capacity. That is not an issue. I think in terms of what this would do to our annual debt service, depending on which option you were to select, the annual average debt service ranges from anywhere to 2.1 million for your closing elm option, up to 2.6 million for the third and main option. Again, that will vary year to year because we do have some provisions in your debt policy that say we'll pay 30% of the principal in the first 5 years, 60% in the first 10, and then that leaves us much smaller debt amounts in those final 10 years of our 20-year term. So if you want me to give you each of those specific numbers right now, I can, or like I said, I'm happy to email those to you so that you can have the specifics. Would you prefer I email it?
Yeah. Can
Okay.
you send that to us. That'd be fine.
Absolutely. And then I think your final question is, what does this do to the forecast in the final years? I think right now the financial forecast that you'll see in your adopted budget book still assumes some moderated revenue growth and some moderated expense growth. But I think what we will really see in actuality in the next few years, as more and more data is coming out every day about inflation, we'll see that on the flip side in assessed value. We'll also see it on the flip side in our expenses. And so I think our forecast can certainly absorb this and handle it without much problem. We did have 2 projects related to the admin building in your forecast already. The CommCare Crisis Center was already in the forecast. So mostly what you have seen reflects some variation of this. There may just be some slight upticks, but I do anticipate there will be some slight upticks in revenue to offset that.
So with, money being cheap right now, what if we waited with these costs? Do you think that they would go? I mean, if we're going to have to do something, what if we waited? What does that do?
I think it is very hard to predict right now what's going to happen with money. I think at the Federal Reserve meeting a few months ago, they anticipated holding interest rates flat through 2022. Now we're hearing that that's probably going to happen sooner than we think. So I do think right now, if you recall our original plan when we had talked about doing administrative building, was maybe doing the bonding for about 75% of the anticipated cost at the front end. So we would have that cash to pay and then doing the final issuance at the end of the project when we know exactly how much to bond. To me, that still seems like a really reasonable option because we do still anticipate pretty good interest rates the next several months. I just read last week that people are retreating to government bonds, right, because they're safer and more stable. And so that works in our favor too. So I do think the longer we wait, the more risk there is that interest rates go up. I also think the supply chain and inflation is going to continue to wreak havoc on us, and that's just really hard to predict.
Okay. So in the long term, when we want to be as fiscally conservative as possible, you're saying that it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Is that?
I would say that particularly under the circumstances where we know that we're using ARPA and that ARPA has a defined term on the end of it. We know we must use that money for so long and then that money is no longer available for leasing. So I would definitely prefer to get this moving. from the financial side of things, but I don't sit in your seats.
Okay, Lindsay, I appreciate you answering those questions. It's very helpful. And
Sure.
you'll send that out to all of us?
I will send it to all commissioners, yes.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you. And I have questions for Lindsay as well, so thank you for the questions, Commissioner Cruz, and thank you, Chairman, for a chance to speak. So going over the money real quickly, this is say I picked one of these around $26 million. And you talked about the 10% contingency. We talked, that was a inflation cost or whatever else you talked about was part of that. So 26 million turns out to be about 28 million. And then you add in on top of that our FF&E and our A&E and all these other things we just talked about. And we're talking about also bond costs on top of that, interest rates, interest costs on the bonds. On top of that, we're talking about $7 million to remodel the main courthouse. We didn't really talk about remodeling the historic courthouse or Munger. Is that included in that at all? Do we need to remodel any of that?
The $7 million that is in the project budget, that is only for the courthouse.
Okay, so will there be other costs associated with remodeling the Munger or the historic courthouse for anything that stays over there for the G? Okay.
I don't have anything projected for that.
All right. So back to Lindsay then. So again, just spitballing some numbers. If I add in $6 million for the A&E and FF&E, and I don't know what the bond costs. I don't know what the bond interest rate or bond interest cost would be. I don't have that in front of me. But we're about $41 million, not counting. So 26 plus 13, or should I say 28 plus 13 is 41. 13 is the 7 and 6 added together. Okay, so to remodel this building, FF&E at the new building, and construction plus contingency. That's $41 million plus bond costs. Am I missing anything yet?
No, and sir, when I was talking about those numbers before, it does include all of those in there.
Okay, all right. And I know we can't bond anything more than 20 years, but the city does. They go to 30 years.
We can choose to. Our policy says 20
Our
years.
policy is 20. Okay. All right, it's a lot to chew on. Let me think about that for a minute. But I want to make sure I have my numbers right. So thank you for that
Yes.
clarification. Some numbers for the presenters, I guess. I've got a few questions. So the square footage that's being created in each of these cases is around 65,000 square feet. But we talked up front, we need about 80,000 counting circulation. So is this 65 count? There's other spaces that are part of this building that's not included in this summary? In all the presentations here, it shows around 65,000 square feet. I understand that correctly.
You're correct.
Okay. Anyway, I guess my point is, do we have a total square footage constructed cost for each of these plans? Is that here somewhere? Am I missing that? Because this doesn't show the circulation, mechanical, bathrooms, things like that aren't part of this. They're not shown. They're not part of this summary that I'm seeing here.
So those square footages are included. So you're right. Each of these has a program of roughly 65,000 square feet. When we put the 30% circulation factor, that gets us up to 81,000. When we studied the adjacencies and how we'd put the building together, we arrived at over that at 84.4. And so the cost estimates on the right, all those square footages that you see there would include that
Okay,
30%
that was my question.
factor.
I just wanted to get back to make sure we're not missing something there. Thank you for that. I want to go back to one of the summary pages. This might be one for Tanya, perhaps, or for manager. But collaboration between departments on the stakeholder input on primary buildings. Maybe I'm wrong in my perspective, but I think the BOCC, we collaborate with our counselor and the manager's office and communications and our finance department pretty much every day. I think there's a lot of discussion that happens every day. Being close together is very, very important. I think that's probably true for the Register of Deeds, the county clerk, and the treasurer's office. I think they are very important for them to be close together. I'm not so sure about those row offices with all the BOCC activities. Those to me seem like different groups of people that don't have a lot of interface between them. I do call them on the phone once in a while, and maybe I even visit them in their office once in a while, but in my 7 years being here, I've not had a huge need to spend much time in the clerk's office or have them come to my office or the treasurer's office or the deeds office. It seems like there's, I'm not sure how many times someone who visits the courthouse right now that's here to visit someone in the commission suite, if they also need to visit someone in the row offices. I guess I'm just wondering, if we had any analysis to find out how connected these things actually are we, I mean, I see right now it's nice to be together. I'm not sure they need to be together. I guess my question is, has there been any thought to how connected the row offices are to the commission activities?
When we did the analysis several years ago, it's not so much a connectivity between the BOCC and the row offices. It's the interoperability of movement of mail and money and checks and all the things that we do on a daily business spectrum. I think that's where the connectivity between the departments comes in. We did an analysis 3 years ago. It is, we have something on paper. I don't know if it's part of the presentation today, but we can resurrect that again.
Absolutely.
Again, I'll say it's a nice to have. I don't know if it's a have to have. And just, again, I think if there's a solution that works, that works out that closeness to those offices, that's great. I'm not so sure it's a have to have. And then one of my questions is, again, I'm not sure exactly the year or how this happened, but I know years ago we had a situation where we had to stay within 3 blocks unless you wanted to go to the, what was that called? The, pardon me? The Public Building Commission, PBC. And so that, I guess, has changed. I see a lot of this analysis that's coming to us today was before that change happened. So can you please clarify that?
Yes, sir. So at the end of 2020, the commission was able to approve and it went into effect a charter resolution, Charter 69. And so that was complementary to your urban designation. And so now, as long as we stay within a certain legal threshold of debt, we are able to do any county building structure, land purchase, any of that is general obligation debt with a normal 3-2 vote of this county commission without requiring going to the PBC. So that 3-block radius for the courthouse campus is no longer in effect.
Okay. Well, with that clarification, so a couple of things I've noticed. I don't know when, this is a pretty complex presentation we went through today. And I've seen, I think, most of this before. A couple of things here are new, but not most of this is stuff I've seen before. I'm just curious, has this been refreshed for today's presentation completely? Has this been completely, I guess, every part of this has been refreshed for today's presentation? Or is this some of this old data?
Do you mean the options that we
Well,
present?
the options and the costs. I mean, the costs are part of this as well. And again, the options, yeah.
So
Both.
everything has been refreshed. What has not been refreshed is the existing buildings, the remodeling in the existing buildings. And if you noted, that's where I put the years, and I referred to the years and the prices. So this particular slide that I have up here, that has not been refreshed for today's prices that you would see in the year 2021. But everything else, every other slide that you've seen here, the pricing, that has been refreshed, as well as the programming.
Okay. Just another observation, I guess, that when we first started talking about some of this stuff, there was a lot. I mean, I would say things have changed quite a bit. And again, I know that the DA has some space. The sheriff has some space. So some of the space needs have changed, and I appreciate the upfront. The space needs in this building have been refreshed. Correct? That's fairly new. The 10 departments that have spoken, that's all been refreshed.
Yeah, the commission approved, of course, a expansion to the sheriff's administration over at the jail site, and have approved space on second and third floor in this building for the DA. So those numbers, even when we looked, I think the question is, when we did the analysis of the needs of the courts due to backlog of COVID, those numbers were factored in. All that additional space was factored in at that time. The additional space the DA got, the additional space the courts got.
Correct.
Okay. So yes.
I guess I'd say that although some people look at this delay as being, very negative, like we've waited too long to do something, I would say our situation's changed a lot in the last few years. So I think the delays actually played out in the taxpayers' favor and in our favor. I think the reality is we're going to have a better building that's more streamlined to what we actually need it to do. Because of the delays have actually changed some things. Like you talk about the print shop's not going to move now, or IT doesn't need to move now. Those were significant costs to the previous plan we looked at. And I know at one point we talked about the election office moving with us, and that's now its own project, I think. So I think these delays have actually served a purpose, so to speak. We've been more thoughtful and more careful as to what we really need, and I think that's okay to talk about things multiple times and take some time at really understanding what needs to happen. All I'd say is, out of what's been presented so far today, the 1A plan, in my opinion, is probably my preference out of what's been presented today. If I had to pick one right this very minute, that's probably what I would want to pick for a number of reasons. But I think the not raising the DA annex, in my opinion, is a huge plus. Not closing Elm Street's a huge plus. I think it more accurately fits what we need here. To me, it's also the lower cost. It's second from the bottom out of the cost estimates, and I think it has a nice front. Should we say has a nice street view? So it still looks like a nice building, but I don't think it's grand. It's just it meets all of the needs, but it's not a grand building. In other words, it's not overdoing it, so to speak. I think sometimes there's a temptation to overdo things. I don't think this one does that. I think it meets all of the needs. So if I had to pick one right now, 1A. But I would just say also, personally, I think the issue of moving to temporary space is more urgent. We have to do that soon. This discussion today about admin building, if we take a little time at this one, that's not a problem. I don't want to delay this for another 7 years. I don't want to delay it for another year. But I do think if we have some renewed take a look and see what's out there, I guess, in light of the PBC change, I would like to have that look, because I know there's over 1 million square feet of office space in the downtown area. There are buildings all over this county that I think would suit us potentially and might save a lot of money. We're talking over $41 million, especially when you add in the bond costs, it could be $45 million. And so that's a pretty big decision. If we take a little bit of time, I don't feel like we need to make this decision before we move to temporary space, because it's two different topics. It's two different discussions. I don't want to delay this permanent space for very long, but I do think we need to take a little bit of time to figure out what else is out there. And I think we have some solutions that seem to work okay, but I'm not completely happy with this one if I have not taken the time to look out there and see what else is out there again. Just one point I would make is, I think the number one reason we rejected the Gander Mountain building, is because it's outside the 3-block area. But clearly, that was a nice location and very convenient to the public, very large enough to meet all of the needs of the collaboration between departments, and functioning efficiency, security, safety. In other words, it checks all the boxes here. But we rejected that, and it was, according to this, it was $21 million. It would have saved at least $5 or $6 million. So I guess my thought would be, I don't think it's wrong to take a little bit of time to look out there and see what else is out there again. I think it's, I don't feel pressure to make this decision immediately on this building. All right, thank you, Chairman.
Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. Those comments kind of sparked some other questions for me. There's one question that I didn't ask, was about green space. We had talked about that before. I would be leaning, if these were the only options right now, I would probably also be leaning towards 1A, but I wonder what the green space would look like. I see that there's green space there, but would there be some dedicated spaces for staff to have outdoor lunchtime seating, those kinds of things? I think that's important for the health and well-being of our employees. I also am not a fan of closing down that street just simply because of access to the jail. I don't think that would be the best idea. So those are my comments around that. But I guess when it comes to, we're going to be vacating this building and going into a lease space, and currently we have ARPA money that will allow us to pay for that, not out of our general fund. But what happens what would be the time frame in which we would kind of need to make a decision? It seems like we've been making really big decisions the whole time I've been on this commission. It seems like there's another huge decision to make, which is great, but let's take some time to figure out exactly how long it's going to take us to make this decision, because those ARPA funds will run out for our lease space. So what's the cost of the square footage? I heard it was like $18 a square foot to rent that out. So that's how much money are we going to be paying for the lease space? For how long?
Well, I'll go, and then Lindsay can correct me. The ARPA money, the grant monies we're using to pay for the county lease lasts until 12/31 of '24.
Okay.
The lease numbers that we are looking at currently, with the amount of space and parking that we have to lease, and I'll shoot a ballpark out there for Tanya to correct me if I'm wrong, 600 to 800,000 per year.
That's correct.
Lease. So that gives you ballpark ideas of what we're looking at. So if we spend 3 years in a lease, you're looking at $2 to $2.2 million out of ARPA funds for that functionality. If we would still be in a lease space after ARPA expires, it becomes then a general fund ticket item. We'll have to budget it out of local dollars to maintain the lease.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, and so let me just speak to a timeline. If we're looking at a new build, I would consider at least 6 months for design, and anywhere between probably 18 to 24 months to build. So you're looking at probably about 2.5 years there. Now, if you're looking at remodeling as an existing building, you can probably take that down a little bit as far as a time frame. But I mean, I would consider between 2 and 2.5 years there.
So even if we pulled the trigger today, we're still going to have to use general fund money to pay for our lease space? No?
I don't think so. So we're getting ready to go into 2022, all of 2023, and all of 2024, where we have ARPA lease dollars available. So we have roughly 3 years.
We have 36 months,
Yeah.
basically, to incur costs.
So under the timeline Tanya just threw out, I think we could make it.
Okay, so we're almost into 2022.
Right. ARPA dollars.
ARPA dollars go to 2024.
Correct.
That's 2 years.
Through 2024.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you for that distinction. Okay, math was not adding up to me, so I appreciate that. Okay, so we have 3 years then for ARPA funds to pay for that space. Okay, so I guess I would say we'd have another year to consider this, if that would be 6 months-ish then, I guess, if I'm being conservative, to determine what we're going to do with admin space. I'm trying to figure out a timeline in which we could utilize ARPA funds to pay for our lease space, but then when that runs out, we could move into a place that would be permanent for Sedgwick County government. So I think that's the timeline maybe we should consider that could give us a due diligence period. Commissioner Howell has asked for some other considerations. I don't take this decision lightly, and I want to make sure that we're doing what's right by the taxpayers, but also the staff that work for Sedgwick County and understanding the functions of our government. And so those are just some considerations. And so I wonder if you guys could come back with a timeline that would be the most appropriate, that would say, okay, for us to not have to pay general fund money for lease space for government operations, this is when we would have to have the decision by, saying best case scenario, and all of these timelines add up correctly. Does that make sense, everybody?
Sure.
Yeah?
We can do that.
Sarah, do you have any questions, or did you hear any of that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the conversation. I mean, it's really helped me understand the situation a little bit more. But, I mean, I think today, if we were voting, I would say I'm leaning towards 1A. but I would like to dig into this a little bit more as well and get the information that you guys have been talking about back. I think one thing I think about when it comes to this admin building is just what we're seeing in other larger communities around the country where there's more of a consolidation between city and county, and I just want to make sure that whatever we end up doing, something that's going to be able to accommodate that, so we're not putting any roadblocks up for future generations that do want to do that consolidation or do more than what we're able to do. And so that's one thing that I'm kind of keeping in the back of my mind going through this process. But I appreciate the conversation today, and I think I've learned a lot. But that's all I have.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Don't say any. Thank you for all the hard work.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Now, we'll change topics. We'll talk about accident review policies, and Elizabeth Wingo from Finance is here with a short presentation.
Well, Elizabeth, welcome to the meeting.
Good morning. Again, I'm Elizabeth Wingo. I'm your Risk Management Coordinator. In addition to today's slide printouts, you should have hard copies of the 3 policies we'll be discussing, along with the supplemental forms. Those are designed that way you can take some time to read through those, and I'm more than happy to do one-on-ones following today's meeting to further discuss these policies. So as you may recall, last fall I was here and we talked a little bit about claims and claim trends and the costs that we've been incurring for those claims. So today I'm here to just kind of give you a refresh of where we're standing a year later with those costs. And then I'm also going to talk to you about best practices for safety programming and how we're proposing to implement some of those best practices here at Sedgwick County through the policies that will come before you on the 15th. So the claim numbers I'm giving you today are just for worker compensation claims, which do make up the majority of the claims that my office processes. So these are divided into 2 areas for you. The blue column are total incidences, and then red are the medical-only claims. Your total incident numbers include those medical claims, but they also include 2 additional types of claims that we process, and that includes injury reports that we receive where an employee is injured, but they don't require medical care, so we call those notification-only claims. And this also includes near-miss incident reports that we do receive as well. So this is the total amount of claim paperwork that our office processes, and then separating out which ones are just the medical claims. And the medical claims are the ones that incur the cost that we're going to talk about on the next slide. You'll notice in 2020, these are updated numbers, which take us through the end of last year. And despite the fact that we sent a lot of people home and we had limited government services, we still had a significant number of claims and medical claims. And that's because the claims that the departments where we have claims, those are our first responder agencies. Those are the departments that were still physically here engaged in work, like our corrections department, the jail staff, EMS, and fire. And your numbers for 2021 are good through this past Friday, and we have processed more claims since then. So here's an update of where we are for our annual cost on worker compensation claims. As you can see, this is trending up across the board. Part of that is due to that higher number of claims that we are processing that require medical care. Another part of that is something that we have no control over. In 2019, the state changed the base fee schedule, which dictates what we pay for worker compensation claims. And so that automatically increased our base costs for each claim that we process. And we do anticipate another adjustment to that fee schedule in the next year or two. So our base cost is going to go up for every single claim in the next year or two as well. So with claims, the cost of claims going up and the number of claims going up, we need to start considering what we can do to create an intervention for Sedgwick County to start flatlining the cost and then trying to bend that curve back down. And a great way to do this would be to boost our safety programming, and specifically really helping employees think about safety and making safety a top of the mind awareness for our employees every single day. So as we speak about top of the mind awareness, I kind of want to give some perspective about the claims that we process and kind of where they fall as to where they indicate safety issues. So there are multiple versions of this triangle or pyramid that exist that kind of explain that there's a relationship between the number of fatalities, injuries, near miss, and unsafe acts that occur. So if we think about for every serious injury, there are 10 minor injuries, there are 100 near miss incidences, and 1,000 unsafe acts that occur. So when we receive an injury report where an employee has sustained an injury, that's a lagging indicator of a larger safety problem that we need to address. So if we think about the fact that we've processed over 200 medical claims this year alone, that means that there are a lot of unsafe acts and a lot of potentials that are near miss opportunities that didn't result in an injury. So our focus is how do we dive in and try to implement change that can prevent those unsafe acts and near misses from occurring, and that should help reduce the number of injuries that we see at the county as well. So OSHA has developed a best practice, and I've included this in your handout today, the full list of, they call it the core elements of safety and health program recommended practices. And this is part of a giant packet that's available on the OSHA website, designed to help organizations implement really thorough and thought out health and safety programs. And 5 of the elements that they discuss, we're going to talk about today and how we're going to integrate those OSHA practices into our new programming here at Sedgwick County. So the first is management leadership. And so this is where we engage all of you, the county manager's office and our department heads, in being strong advocates for safety, because when all of you approve and engage in our safety programming, that gives employees the green light as well to be engaged in safety programming. We're going to talk about ways that we're going to engage what they call the workers. So we're going to add multiple opportunities for employees all across the organization to be more involved in safety programming and safety activities at the county. We're going to introduce to employees how to identify hazards through routine self-inspection of their workplaces, and we're going to teach employees how to identify hazards through root cause analysis following an incident. And then we're going to ensure that supervisors and departments have the resources and knowledge to prevent and control hazards that they've identified. And the last, we're going to make sure that we provide ample opportunity for our employees, supervisors, and departments to learn safety and to be engaged in new safety training opportunities and ensure that we're teaching safety in a consistent method across the county. All right, so right now, when an incident occurs, an employee, let's say, has a slip and fall incident and they sustain an injury, they're going to report that to their supervisor. Right now, the supervisor completes a single-page worksheet which recounts basically the employee's story of the incident and how it unfolded, and doesn't do much else. So what we're proposing is a new process to engage our supervisors, which is the first policy we're going to talk about, which is the post-incident review, policy 2.510. So I will, there are copies of the form, but we'll also highlight a few of the sections here on the coming slides. So like I said, this is going to replace the previous paperwork that supervisors used. We're also going to teach supervisors how to take witness statements and to better document incident scenes so we can capture the full facts and scopes of incidences for that review process. And the good news for supervisors is with our current process, supervisors have to do 2 different forms sometimes for the same incident. So if an employee is involved in a motor vehicle accident and there's a physical injury component, the supervisor has to complete a supervisor form for both the motor vehicle accident and the physical injury component. This will now be a single form which will cover both portions of the incident. So we're trying to make things a little bit easier and smoother for our supervisors. On the flip side, this is slightly a longer form that we're asking them to complete, but as I'll show, we've added some things to try to make it more user-friendly, so it shouldn't add a lot of time to their day to complete this paperwork. And then once the new post-incident review paperwork is completed, this will get forwarded on to the Safety and Accident Review Boards, which is the second new policy we'll talk about here in a couple slides. So as I mentioned, we're trying to simplify paperwork for supervisors. This is a snapshot of part of the form that they would complete. So historically, the supervisor's form really just asked them to, what is your understanding of the event, but it didn't really give them any guidance as to how to record what they were hearing and understanding from their employee. And a lot of times supervisors witness an incident as well. So we've clarified the top so they can check all of these boxes that help my office know how to quickly process the claim. Is it just an injury to the employee? Did the employee need medical care? Was there damage to county property, private property? Because these are all different processes that we need to manage within our office. And then on the bottom half, we've given more information to the supervisor as to the type of information that we're looking for. Who was involved? What happened? When did the incident occur? Where did it occur? And why did the incident occur? And then we're again reminding them to include photographs of the scene, recordings, and getting those witness statements as well. A new thing that we're helping supervisors learn how to do is to think about the direct cause of the incident. And this portion is a preparation and the supervisor's engagement in preparing this paperwork to go to the Safety and Accident Review Board so they can do root cause analysis. So we're asking the supervisor to think about what are the direct causes that led to the incident. So in the case of a slip and fall, this would be a slip and fall, that they would circle that. Maybe it's a fall from the same level. So a same level fall would be like if I were to trip and fall right here, I trip and fall onto the same level that I tripped on, versus a fall from an elevation, so a higher level to a lower level. We're just asking them to circle anything that might be appropriate. The direct cause information is also required when we do our work comp filings with the state, so that's part of the reason that this is on here as well. In addition to having supervisors think more about what is the cause. This used to be a free form response that wasn't always completed completely. And so that's why we provided some of these quick response answers that are the ones that are most common to the incidences that we see here. And then we're again asking them to think about, okay, beyond the direct cause, was there anything else that could have added to the history that could have caused that incident? So those are contributing causes on the bottom. And a full copy of the 4 pages that supervisors will complete is in your packet with the policy. All right, so we've updated our flow chart of how kind of this new process is working. Our supervisors have completed their post-incident review. They're going to send a copy of that completed paperwork to their department director so they're aware of the incident that's occurred. They're going to make sure risk management receives all their paperwork. And then this is the point in which a supervisor would issue discipline if it's appropriate, given the cause of incident. And then risk management is going to start the process of getting that paperwork to the Safety and Accident Review Board so they can start doing root cause analysis. So our second policy today is the 2.511 Safety and Accident Review Boards. And through this policy, what we've done is we've established 6 safety and accident review boards, which are based around the similar functions or risk of departments within Sedgwick County. And the full listing is in your policy, but I thought I'd like to kind of highlight one, which kind of shows where we're pulling people from unusual areas together. So, for instance, one of the groups we've created is the Facilities and Environmental Services Safety and Accident Review Board. So that's going to pull together facilities and maintenance, fleet management, the Parks Department, Public Works, and the zoo, because those departments engage in a lot of similar style activities, which means they have similar risk, so they can share and learn things from each other as they go through the accident review process. The goal of these SARBs is to focus on the continuous improvement of safety and the county's safety culture. So by adding SARBs, not only are we creating an opportunity for more employee engagement, but we're also adding transparency and accountability to safety programming at Sedgwick County. The SARBs will meet at least on a quarterly basis. For departments that have high incident rates, they're probably going to meet on a monthly basis, just so they can really focus on reviewing those incidences as they arise. In addition to reviewing the paperwork submitted by the supervisors, those post-incident reviews, they're also going to review safety concerns that are submitted by employees. And they're going to discuss and disseminate information from the Executive Safety Council, which is our third policy that we'll talk about, and make sure that the departments that they represent and those safety teams are aware of kind of anything coming from the next level of safety engagement. So we're going to really dive into that root cause analysis role of the Safety and Accident Review Board on the next slide. But I did want to briefly mention safety teams because this is a new term as well. So we do still have departments that have existing safety committees. Those committees will be replaced by safety teams. And we've added some better guidance as to what we're looking for those teams to do at the departmental level in this policy, which is going to include things like they're going to take a larger role in ensuring that departments are doing safety training, making sure that the departments practice their emergency evacuation procedures, and to help with monthly inspection checklist to kind of help us more proactively deal with just little things that pop up so we can mitigate those early on. And again, this is another opportunity for employees to be engaged in safety programming at the departmental level. So we're just going to briefly talk about root cause analysis, and I'm sure most folks are at least familiar with this term, but I wanted to kind of explain how we're planning to utilize it here within the Safety and Accident Review Board process. So root cause analysis is a methodology which is used to determine the fundamental underlying system or behavioral reason an incident has occurred. We've developed a template which you can see in your packets, that will be used by the Safety and Accident Review Boards to guide them through this process. We're also going to do a lot of training with these SARBs once we get them stood up, so everyone is comfortable and understands what they're doing. We're not just throwing them to the wolves. This is a big change, so we're going to help them out. There are many different approaches to root cause analysis. You may be familiar with there are various types of charts and diagrams that can be used. OSHA recommends the 5 method. It's probably the most simplistic method of root cause analysis, and that's what we're going to introduce to our SARBs first and get them started and comfortable using that methodology, and then we can build from there. So the 5 method is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to ask five why questions, and you can actually use what or how as well, but it is called the 5 why method. So I've put together a little example that I'd like to walk through just so folks can understand kind of how that questioning works to find a root cause analysis. So if we return to our example of an employee has a slip and fall that results in an injury, that's the scenario that we're faced with. So we ask our first why. Why did the employee slip and fall? We look into it and we discover that the employee slipped on hydraulic oil that was on the floor. Okay, second why. Why was there hydraulic oil on the floor? It leaked from the forklift that was being used during that shift. Why was the forklift being used if there was an oil leak? The forklift operator didn't know it was leaking. Why didn't the forklift operator know that it was leaking? He didn't check for oil leaks before operating the forklift. Why didn't he check for oil leaks? Because while the employee completes a pre-trip inspection, checking for oil leaks is not on that checklist. So now we've discovered our root cause, which is there's an error with the checklist that we need to correct, and that's what caused the accident. So once our SARBs find that root cause, and there could be multiple root causes, but once they identify those, what they're going to do is develop a preventative action plan. And we used to call these corrective actions, and unfortunately, that kind of led people more down a disciplinary track than a how do we prevent this from occurring again track. So we've changed that language to try to clarify our intent here. So once they've identified, again, that root cause, that preventative action plan, what they're going to do is they're going to say the action that needs to be taken, assign it to someone, and give it a deadline for when it needs to be completed. So in our example with the oil leak, we would assign changing the checklist to someone who has the authority to change the checklist, provide that person a deadline, and then follow up with them during the next SARB to ensure completion of that action item. All right, so our SARBs have completed their root cause analysis. They've done their preventative action plans that's been developed and implemented. And now we're going to talk about the relationship up to the Executive Safety Council. So this is our third new policy for today. The Executive Safety Council, again, represents part of OSHA's management leadership engagement item that we talked about earlier. The council is going to look at safety from the organizational perspective and play a pivotal role in advocacy and implementation of a positive safety culture throughout the organization. This group will meet at least quarterly to review safety and incident trends like I showed you earlier in my presentation, help direct safety training throughout the organization based on those trends, discuss any post-incident reviews and root cause analysis, which could have larger learning opportunities across the organization, and just any other items that could come up. So when a post-incident review or root cause analysis is discussed at this level, it's because we're trying to break down those silos between the SARBs, where even though we've grouped people based on their risk and the similar jobs that they do, there can still be a lot of knowledge sharing that can happen between those groups as well, and that can happen at the Executive Safety Council. We'll also see additional types of activities that the Executive Safety Council is going to be involved with within the safety programming, including they're going to help participate and select the annual employee safety slogan that we do every year, and that way they can help kind of develop a theme and a direction for safety for that year to come. And they can also, if they wish, develop and kind of head up a safety initiative program. And those are very popular right now, but we would leave that up to the Executive Safety Council to kind of see what's appropriate for our organization. How do we, again, keep promoting safety and acknowledge and reward employees who are doing a good job and being proactive in safety. The Executive Safety Council also then is the point of contact with the Board of County Commission and the county manager on safety topics, any concerns that you all have that need to be addressed throughout the organization related to safety. So this is our final slide showing the entire flow chart of how that accident review process works and how everyone is connected together. And then I've added additionally where those OSHA principles that we talked about, the things that they're looking for, the engagement types, and how those align with each step of these policies that we've talked about today, because we're really trying to implement those best practices from OSHA to bring that top of the mind awareness of safety to our employees to really help drive down those incident rates, which is the only way that we'll start to see a reduction in our cost for worker compensation claims. So hopefully, I've done a well enough job of explaining these policies to you, and really the goal of these SARBs and adding accountability and transparency for safety and making sure that we're engaging employees at all levels with safety programming at Sedgwick County. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you for walking us through this. Very thorough indeed. Any questions? Or Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And thanks, Elizabeth. We're getting somewhere on safety. I feel confident we'll get where we need to be. I appreciate it. My first question is for the manager, though. We put in the budget a safety officer position. Are we advertising that?
I'm going to refer to Lindsay on that as well, or Elizabeth, if you know.
The position closes tomorrow, and we have received quite a few wonderful candidates, and we will begin interviews next week.
Very good. Well, I'm glad to see that that's moving forward. As you were going through this, what my worry is, we don't want to go too fast and adopt some things until we get a professional safety officer to take a look at this also, to see if there are other things that maybe we need to be able to include. And it can always be altered later on, but I didn't really see anything about fire safety, confined spaces, lockout, tagout, traffic safety, medical hazardous materials, lifting. I mean, there's just tons of different things that go into safety. And as you started out your briefing, you really were talking about workman comp, and sure, that's a big part of it. But as you look at an entire safety program, one of the basic tenets is that it's a chain of events that causes an incident. And if you break any link in that chain of events, you don't have an incident. And so inspections of workplaces and so forth are very important as we move forward. So I don't have a problem with adopting what you've got put together. But I think as we get a safety officer to look at everything that's involved in a safety program for an organization of 3,000 people, with all of the buildings that we have, with hundreds of vehicles, with so many different aspects of our organization, we're probably going to have to modify this as we move forward. And so we need to look at this as a living document rather than something that is a final step. And as we get smarter, then we can change this living document and keep moving forward. So again, I appreciate where we're at right now. I don't know if we're at our final location. That's just the point that I want to make.
And I completely agree with you. I meant to indicate that this is just the first of many steps that we will be taking. So we do plan to review these policies after a year to see how everything's working out, and we're just going to keep making progress.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, a great presentation. How much time have you guys spent developing all of this? I'm just curious.
It's been almost a year of research and policy development.
Very good. I think it shows you guys did a tremendous job on the first presentation on this. It's pretty well done, I think. So thank you for a good job. It is quite a lot of material, and again, so I'd ask, what's our intent to adopt this? When do we plan to see something like this?
A lot of that depends on comments from commissioners today, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Elizabeth or Lindsay. Clearly, this is a significant shift organizationally, and clearly it's a real-time commitment, not only from Elizabeth and her staff, but from the supervisors and department heads of this county. I would think, Commissioner, to answer your question directly, sometime after first quarter of 2022.
We've not spent much time today talking about pre-training prior to the accident, prior to the incident, to make sure that people know their requirements or expectations. Is that part of this plan somehow? I mean, I've not seen that here today. Maybe I missed it, but is there some discussion about even if it's a long-term employee, making sure that they once a year review their policies and procedures, for example, and sign off on those, that maybe watch a training video once a year. I just don't know what the plan is on that side.
So some of the other policies that we'll be working on in the coming years are like risk assessment. And so that would be part of risk assessment, is to see what departments are doing to make sure employees annually are kept up on the best practices for their job. And is that new training, retraining, sending them to courses for recertification, things of that. So that's one of the policies that we'll be looking into to make sure that we are doing pre-training to, again, avoid those incidences the first go round.
I think the very front end of this talks about, basically, management or commission support of this entire program, which I think is a financial decision, but it's an investment in trying to lower the cost down the road by having better understanding of what is expected and what is considered safe and not safe. There's a lot of incidents. You said 392 incidents in 2021 so far, and that's more than one a day. So it's probably going to be over 400 before the end of this month, I'm pretty sure. Is there any analysis as to, can you put these in different bins, like, back injuries, vehicle accidents, is there a way to take that and break that down into some type of, where's our low-hanging fruit? Where's our biggest problems in the county? To me, if you break that down, maybe you'll figure out where to start.
At this time, we don't have the software to be able to do that. And that's one of the things we've been working with IT on. And that will be hopefully part of the next budget proposal, will be significant software upgrades to risk management, so we can produce those reports and we know exactly how many back injuries, how many lifting injuries, how many motor vehicle accidents that are happening per department every single year.
Very good. And one of the, so real quickly, this is, I think, 5 different forms that you guys have generated that could be filled out, and 3 different policies, 12 pages worth of policy to review here, and about 13 pages worth of forms to review. A lot of information there, but one of the ones I just, right off the bat, I noticed that, I noticed on the post-incident review, for example, talks about, injuries and nature of the injury as if it's a single person. There may be multiple pages necessary if there's more than one person injured, for example. That's just one observation. Second thing I noticed is it doesn't really, although you talk about inattentive driving, I would say probably the number one reason we have accidents on the roads all around us is distraction. And I don't see that listed specifically as distraction. Perhaps their cell phone made a noise or whatever, but there's distractions. I'd like to know that should be one of the questions that specifically is asked, is were you focused on your job here, or were you distracted? And maybe it's a cell phone. I think that's something we need to be very intentional about asking that. And the other one I would say is poor judgment. Perhaps they thought they would, they could fit through the garage, and for some reason they didn't. It wasn't wide enough. They just didn't realize how wide their vehicle was, or how tall it was, or whatever it was. Poor judgment is another one of those things I think maybe should be listed here. But to that end, I agree with Commissioner Dennis that part of me says this is so much information. I'd like to get started sooner than later, but on the other hand, I don't want to say I'm completely happy with 100% of everything that's here. I think we can make it better as we go forward. So with that, in the legislature, I always have this idea of doing sunsets. It forces us back to the table to review. You said you're going to review this in 1 year. Is there something out there that causes us to do that, or is that something we just do behind the scenes and it happens without our knowledge, or something that forces us to do that 1 year review? How do we know it's going to get reviewed?
Of the policy?
Yeah.
Commissioner? Well, first of all, Lindsay gave me a sidebar while you were talking. I think her preference is that maybe the commission review, and as soon as the 12-15 meeting, so we can at least approve the policy and then spend the first quarter of 2022, when we get the safety officer on board, standing this up. The answer to your second question is that's if the commission wants to move that quickly on this. The second question you ask is we're implementing policy to review all existing county policies on a calendar time. And the safety policy, I think, with the executive portion of this committee, would be reviewing this policy annually, a minimum. But I agree with Commissioner Dennis, it is a living document that you will always be tweaking and always managing because it's that important.
So when we adopt this, are we adopting these forms in their current, let's say we don't make any changes and we adopt it as it was presented today, are we adopting these forms in their current state, or can they be, could you add a question to them without having to come back before the BOCC, or we have to?
So what you would adopt are the policies themselves. The supplementals are not subject to commission approval. So those are the living documents. So especially as we start working with supervisors, as we discover more things that need to be added, we can make tweaks, we can reissue the paperwork, and it will be those living, breathing documents so we get the best information and we can have the largest impact.
Okay, thank you. I noticed it says drug alcohol testing protocol used in suspicion required for CDL. Now, I understand if you're an ambulance driver or a fire truck driver, there's no CDL required. Or a sheriff's vehicle, no CDL required. Only if you're driving, I assume, a dump truck perhaps, is a CDL required there?
There are a high number of public work employees, and there are some employees in, I believe, the aging department that are CDL drivers.
Okay, so if a CDL is required for the job and they have an incident, post-incident review, they will have to be drug alcohol tested regardless of the damages or injuries.
Correct.
It seems to me that if there's no property damage and there's no injury, that might be the one time where you might say it's discretionary. But if there's injuries or property damage, I would think you'd want to drug and alcohol test whoever we think is a responsible person, potentially, find out if that's a factor in the incident or not. But it seems to me like this is very discretionary. So
Presently, the drug and alcohol testing policy, and Sheena can correct me if I'm wrong, it's required for CDL drivers, and that's tied to Department of Transportation regulations for CDL drivers. For all other employees, it's at the supervisor's discretion. So one of the things that we've added that we didn't talk about is that we're going to engage the supervisors in responding to those motor vehicle accident scenes if law enforcement doesn't respond, so that when they check the scene, if they have concerns about the employee, they can go ahead and implement that protocol right then and there instead of a significant delay in deciding to follow that protocol.
I guess it's just as a matter of closing out the details around the accident. It would be good to, I don't know what drug and alcohol testing costs. Let's make that a small investment for the situation. I mean, maybe it would be undetected by the supervisor, undetected by, I think you'd want to check that box and know that that wasn't a factor. I mean, if it is a factor and it's not detected, that's a real problem. And I come from an aviation world, and I can tell you every single incident that ever happened is drug and alcohol tested, every single one. There's no exceptions. Doesn't matter why. That's the first stop, and you have to be there very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'd be more in favor of maybe just making that part of the regular policy rather than making it discretionary. Just a thought.
Commissioner Howell, government employees are treated differently under drug and alcohol testing than you would have experienced in the aviation industry. You have to have reasonable suspicion to drug test most county employees, except for those that are in safety-sensitive positions. So just wanted to make that clear, that we're always looking at that as we develop these policies.
At least there's an answer to the question. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Lopez, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't have anything that hasn't already been said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I don't see any, so thanks again for the presentation and good luck with everything you're working on.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else, Tom? Okay, we will adjourn and for this meeting today, and we'll see everybody tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Sarah. Good luck.